John Kavakis here for My Take. Today we're going to take out of the box the Goldvarg's 1974 Buick Century. Now 1973 was a pivotal year in American automobile design. Some people call it the end of an era, some people call it the beginning of another. But the pollution situation had an impact on the design of cars. In 1973, not so much. Certainly 1974, the exhaust gas recirculating pumps, the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, some of the new restrictions and everything began to take its toll on design. And some of the people think that design started getting clunky in 1974 or so. There were some other things that were happening. We had a gas crisis that made the desire to buy big block engines, high performance cars a little less than it was before. The insurance companies had started cracking down on high performance cars. So out of necessity, sales were shifting to more fuel efficient cars, cars that didn't have quite as much horsepower. Also, the SAE changed the way they rated horsepower. Late 1972, they went from gross to net, in other words, horsepower at the crank, compared to horsepower somewhere near the rear wheels. So the actual horsepower numbers were down when the horsepower didn't actually change all that much. But the pollution controls did have an impact on horsepower. So by the time we got to 1973, intermediates were kind of the big market segment. The big cars were getting very large, very heavy. GM had a new A-body in 1973, new design for their 4 doors and their 2 doors. They called colonnade design. Well, what is colonnade design? It's actually a design that's been around quite a bit longer than most people realize. Technically, it's an architectural term that says a series of columns are holding up a roof. So we've seen this before. You take a look around at some in modern design you may have seen, but you've certainly seen it in some classic designs, maybe in some areas that would surprise you. Once you know what it is, you'll see it all over the place. Whether or not you see it in the automobile designs of the General Motors intermediate cars in the mid-70s, well, I'm going to leave that up to you. So for 73, they came out with a new design. 1974, we had the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers. We had the controls on the engines. Things were starting to look a little bit dismal, but there was still some performance available. You could get the 74 Buick Century with a standard 150 horsepower engine. It was available still with a stage 1 455 270 horsepower engine. Not quite as powerful as the fire-breathing engines of the late 60s, early 70s, but still, for its time, pretty formidable. And so people called this, and they still look back on it, as the Malaise Era. It's an era where the car manufacturers were spending a lot more time and development dollars on controlling emissions, on making the cars safer. Now, those were all good things that worked out for us, but for those of us that grew up in the 50s and 60s, we view the Malaise Era as a dark time, and it would be easy for us to forget that there were still young people walking around watching TV, poking their noses in showrooms in the 70s or mid-70s and on late 70s or so, and thinking those are the cars that I want to buy when I grow up. I want to buy a car like my favorite detective is driving. I want to buy a car like this movie star is driving. And they were driving new cars. And there was still some performance to be had. Everything is relative. We shied away from the huge gas guzzling performance cars of the early 70s, but we still wanted to have the quickest car available on the market, the nicest model available. So there was a lot to be said for designs that occurred in the 70s or so. And I hesitate to call them the Malaise Era. There was a lot of room, a lot of work being done on interiors. They became more flamboyant, more luxurious, more features. So we can be thankful for that. Goldvarg's given us a copy of the 74 Buick Century. He's made it available in 2 colors. One of them was ginger poly, which I have here. The other is nutmeg poly, And you know, if you were a fan of a certain detective series on TV in the early 70s, guy that ate a lot of lollipops, drove around New York City in a nutmeg 74 Buick Century. So both of these colors are still available. You can get them through Goldvarg, get them through Legacy Motors. Let's put it on the turntable and take a look at it. The car is typical Goldvarg. It's beautiful finish. The color seems to be a little bright when you take it out of the box, but comparing it to color chips and other cars of the same color, it's a great color. They've done a really good job with it. The nutmeg is the same. The grille, the chrome bumpers and everything, just beautiful. Lensing on the headlights and on the taillights is superb. In particular on the taillights, they've got that real delicate chrome surround on the taillights. Really hard to see, but they've gone through the extra effort on that. The badging on the car is phenomenal. Microscopic in some places, but really well done. The side marker lights were well picked out. The trim on the windows, on the window and the rear window, the front window and the rear window is really well done. Side windows has a little bit of the photo edge effect, a little too flat. Not distractingly so, but a little too flat, and I've seen better on other Goldvargs. The interior is beautiful. The dash is exceptionally well picked out, great steering wheel. The seats are true to what we saw in the factory literature. Door panels are well trimmed out, separate door handles, beautifully done interior. The wheels and tires are good. Matter of fact, they're very good. The wheels are properly body colored. The white walls are the right size. If they were really a base car, they would be black walls. The dog dish wheel covers are well represented, but could use a little bit of dimension. It's a beautiful car, and I think it's a reminder that there was this era in automobile design in the 1970s that maybe we don't really appreciate, those of us who grew up earlier, but those who grew up during that time really look back upon these quite fondly. So let's take the 5-star rating. Fidelity, I'm going to give this car a 5. Trim, lensing, and badging, I'm only going to go 4, only because of those side windows, just a little too flat. Again, they're not distracting, but once you see them, you see them. Color, 5. Interior detail, 5. Wheels and tires, 4. And the overall value at $99, a 5, a solid 5. So that takes our overall rating up to a total of 28 points and 4.5 stars. Goldvarg 74 Buick Century gets 4.5 stars. Hey, thanks for spending time with me. I appreciate you watching these videos. I'll be back again soon.